is the Director of New York Innovation Center of the Federal Reserve Bank of New York, and Denelle Dixon, who is CEO and Executive Director of Stellar Development Foundation. So I really think this conversation is a bit of an evolution of some of the discussion we had yesterday. Acting comptroller of the currency was, I thought his statement was really interesting yesterday when effectively said, you know, tokenization of real world assets is not really about crypto, right? It's about creating frictionless financial markets and effectively integrating distributed ledger technology into our financial markets. And I think that's true, but there's still certainly some challenges to think through and things that we're going to talk through. So to set the stage, tokenization of traditional financial markets really has the potential, I think, of revolutionizing how we do business. It's indeed already gaining momentum. We'll talk about that specifically with David and Per. And I would posit the tokenized real-world assets have the potential to stimulate lasting widespread adoption on a global scale. Interestingly enough, while radio, television, and email took 30 years to generate mass adoption, a report by Bank of America Global Research last year expects tokenization of real-world assets to transform financial and non-financial infrastructure in public and private financial markets over the next 5 to 15 years. Thought leaders are projecting that tokenized assets will make up 10% of the GDP by the end of the decade, and that total market value of tokenized assets across all industries will exceed $10 trillion by 2030. So how are we going to get there? So Commissioner Perks, I'd like to start with you. You know, as I just mentioned, this really isn't about crypto, but I think for the lawyers in the room as well, you know, the question is, what is really our regulatory path forward? How do we have a clear path, and do you think that putting our financial markets on DLT is going to face the same challenges that we have right now with crypto in the United States? And how do we regulate around these markets?
Well, thanks, and it's great to be here. I do want to give you my disclaimer, which is my views are my own views as a commissioner, not necessarily those of the SEC or my fellow commissioners. And I think when I think about this problem, I think you framed it really nicely, right? Is that this is really something different than a lot of the crypto world that we've been talking about to date.
Yeah.
But I think the problem is you still have the same regulators, and you have regulators who are looking at it as being crypto, as being an aspect of crypto. And this has been one of the things for me that has been the most frustrating about watching our approach in the United States to regulating crypto. We have precluded interesting experiments in using the DLT as a way to displace existing infrastructure in the financial services space, because people have not felt a welcoming attitude from regulators in trying to experiment with those kinds of things. And so they've done that in other jurisdictions instead of here in the US. But I think if we could get past that and we could start to think, wow, this could really transform the way things are done, it could eliminate some of the frictions that we're concerned about in this space, then I think we could allow small scale experiments. That's something that I've advocated, that we have some sort of a sandbox structure where people can come in and say, hey, this is the experiment I'm trying to try. I want to try it. Here are the conditions that I want to use. And it sort of would force the issue at the SEC. Instead of having to come in for a no action letter, or an exemptive order, this would say, no, we're going to try this, and we'll tell you how it works out. Here are the conditions. And the goal then would be to get to more permanent relief. So I think something like that in the area of tokenization could be helpful. Now, a lot of real world asset tokenization is not going to be within the SEC's remit at all, is my guess. So yeah, if you take a bond or a stock and you tokenize it, that's certainly within our remit. Our rules already are there, and you just have to apply them to this new form. And so to the extent our rules are technology neutral, they should be able to accommodate those kinds of things. Again, you may need to make some adjustments, but we have the authority to do that. I've been complaining for a long time about the fact that we haven't updated our transfer agent rules, but this could be an opportunity for us to update them with on understanding of why it's important to be technology neutral, so that we could really allow the blockchain to be the record as opposed to having to have some off-chain record. So I think there's a lot of things for us to think about, but we have to be willing to think.
Just one follow-up to that, as a regulator, when we sort of see this dialect, Chris actually stole my question, but I'm still gonna ask. Commissioner Peirce, when we have sort of this technology and it's evolving at a rapid rate, how do we square trying to be nimble against sort of the reduced discretion that we now have given the return of the Chevron document? It's a balancing act. What are sort of the principles that regulators really come to the table in order to properly regulate these?
I mean, I think it's really just trying to appreciate the fact that this technology can help us as regulators. It can make our jobs easier. It can address some of the issues that we've seen. With respect to the elimination of Chevron, I mean, that certainly is a landmark moment, but the SEC has always known that it's going to go into court and it's going to face questions, and so we should be coming with our strongest game in terms of what our statutory authority is. And so I think even if Chevron were in place, we should be asking those questions. Are we staying in our jurisdictional bounds? And that's something that in recent years we've been straying outside of, and I think especially in this area, it's really important that we stay in our lane, that we make sure that we're not stopping people from doing things that are tokenizing when it's tokenizing something that just isn't in our space. We can stay out. That's someone else's issue to deal with.
Thank you. Let's turn a little bit to a bit of the past, but we're going to at the same time look into the future. The World Bank priced the first Swiss franc digital bond, which will settle using Swiss francs, wholesale CBDC provided by the Swiss National Bank. The 7-year Swiss franc, $200 million digital bond, it wasn't dollar, it was Swiss franc, is the largest World Bank Swiss franc bond issuance since 2009 using distributed ledger technology, which will support the financing of the World Bank's sustainable development activities. The issuance, which was on Sixth Digital Exchange, SDX, follows the World Bank's recent digital issuance on Euroclear's digital financial market infrastructure. So if we turn to David Noon, and we look a little bit to the future of what we think we're going to see here in the U.S., certainly, as predicted in the next 5 to 15 years, we see a regime that is already shaping and is already incorporated into an integrated tokenized capital markets. Sixth Digital Exchange, SDX, is the world's first fully regulated stock exchange and central securities depository, which is effectively doing tokenized digital issuances in the capital markets. So what you've done is a little bit like looking at the future for the U.S. Can you talk to us about the experience to date, the successes, some of the challenges that you see, and in particular, I want to sort of look under the hood and address the utilization of wholesale CBDC and its importance, and your views on that, and sort of the integration as well of stable point into these issuances, and effectively how that infrastructure works.
Thank you very much, and thank you very much for having me. Yes, I think that the Commissioner at this point, so Switzerland is an example of what you can do when you have an environment that can support innovation and exploration in this particular space. So, as you mentioned, the Sixth Digital Exchange, the world's first financial market infrastructure, to be granted a license to operate a CSD and an exchange built on blockchain technology back in 2021. And that was possible because we have in Switzerland a regulator which has clarity around digital assets regulation, but also is an effective regulator as well when it comes to apply those regulations. Has a track record of having a sort of deep understanding of digital assets more broadly as well, and has supported the crypto valley and the innovation that represents. So that's given us the capacity within Switzerland to actually build blockchain solutions, whether it's on the fully regulated side, which Six Group, what Six Digital Exchange is part of, the FMI for Switzerland, has been exploring since 2018 when they first embarked on the SDX project. what the challenge we've had is, first of all, well, we had a regulator which supported this innovation. We then got a licensed blockchain, which then enabled market participants to then carry out activities on that blockchain in relation to digital securities, basic securities. We have the ability on that blockchain to do the issuance, the trading, the settlement, and custody of digital securities in a fully regulated environment. But that enabled us to bring on board quite a sizable number of banks onto that network. The challenge we've had, we experienced after the first issuance and the subsequent issuances we had, was that the cash leg aspect of having cash on chain was somewhat was a major constraint to scaling. So the first thing is get regulation in place that enables this innovation to happen in the first place. The second issue is it's getting participation, but then that participation is going to require a risk settlement asset. And we looked at various different ways that you could achieve that, cash on chain, and the most optimal manner that we have explored bankruptcy remote vehicles and trigger mechanisms and other technology solutions that can achieve something similar. It was a wholesale CBDC, and that's specifically a wholesale, not a retail, no interest in still around retail CBDC, that was required for scaling. Because if we have whole tokens as a market participants on our balance sheet to enable transactions to occur on a regulated blockchain, if they're anything else than a risk settlement asset, that incurs a balance sheet charge. So the more activity, the higher the capital charge associated with that, and therefore you immediately have a scaling issue when it comes to participation. So we've been working with the SMB, which I think is a very innovative, forward-looking central bank, possibly the most of all Western developed economies. And on various CBDC experimentations for a number of years now, cross-border as well as within Switzerland. And in December of last year, we carried out the first transactions in wholesale CBDC on a structured environment. So by June of this year, by the end of that phase of the project called Helvetia, phase 3, we settled 750 million francs worth of bonds that have been issued by the city of Zurich, the city of Basel, the UBS, the city of Ghana, and ultimately also the World Bank. $750 million, which added up to around 1.5 billion francs worth of bonds in total on the platform so far. We also saw the Swiss National Bank conducting the first ever monetary policy operations on a regulated blockchain. So they issued SMB bills, again settling in wholesale CBDC. And that sort of really enabled us to show that we could, from an operational perspective, a technical perspective, in a regulated fashion, safe and so on, actually facilitate these transactions in these different use cases in wholesale CBDCs on a regulated blockchain, which gave the SMB and our market participants the confidence to then proceed with what's called Helvetia pilot, which is now a minimum of 2 years of supporting wholesale CBDC for a broader range of use cases on the Sixth Exchange platform, for the issue of trading and settlement of securities, digital securities on the platform for at least 2 years with an option to roll that forwards. And that's then enabled us to encourage more activity on the platform, which then at this point, I think we said we've achieved equivalence in terms of what we can do on this regulated blockchain versus traditional infrastructure, and has now enabled us to start deploying more blockchain-specific solutions, one that actually use the sort of intrinsic qualities of the blockchain to actually facilitate totally new sort of financial innovation. And that's around the fractionalization of assets, it's mobilization of collateral, tokenization of non-traditional assets and so on. So I think it's all building up to the point we're at now, where we can sort of step into the next generation of financial market infrastructure, which will support innovation for the Swiss Financial Centre for the years to come.
Let me raise, all of this is fascinating, and it brings me sort of with my legal and regulatory hat on, brings me to the question that gets asked so much here in the US, which is analogized across all of the issues that we think about digital assets in Web3, is sort of putting the financial markets on notice for hacks, cybersecurity risks, technology risks. All of that seems quite heightened when we is it even better, right? We've heard commenters certainly say that actually the risks posed are then solved by the technology itself. Like, what are your thoughts on that? Or anybody on the panel would like to?
Briefly go into that, it was obviously required that we address those concerns with the regulator before they got to the license. Given their experience in other chain, they have a lot of insight into whether it's actually up. So we have to sort of indicate how we're going to address those particular risks. It was one of the obvious aspects of the digital exchange that we run a pilot permission data, which enables us to have complete sort of governance around the perimeter of the technology. We are in discussion with the regulator about how we can extend operations on the public chain, but in a way that's obviously safe and secure, and it does indeed, we end up having those issues around, or questions around how do we actually facilitate those operations in a way that doesn't actually in any way add risk to our primary requirement being a CSP. So that brings into focus and awareness that reality happens, that happens on the technology that we have as a CSP have to operate and own the risk room that we go around that. So you can see that we are enabling ourselves to extend into public chain space. I think we're getting that, but in a way that I think again is safe and secure, doing it step by step.
Now, why don't we sort of follow to you, right? On the heels of what we heard from David, the U.S. banking system has actually been actively engaged, rolled up their sleeves, and participating in Project Agora and also the RSN POC. Can you walk us through your work in those two projects to date and what the U.S. has really been looking at on the Federal Reserve Bank?
Absolutely, very happy to, and it's a pleasure to be here with you all today. Appreciate the opportunity, and I'll start with my disclaimer also, which is any of my comments reflect my own opinions, but not necessarily those of the Federal Reserve Bank of New York or the Federal Reserve System. And the New York Innovation Center at the New York Fed, where I work, has a mission of generating insights that inform central bank-related opportunities that ultimately can lead to innovations that may enhance the functioning of the global financial system. So all of our work is really anchored in that sort of mission. And the type of work that we do is also based on a model of collaboration. So we have a team at the New York Fed. We work extensively with colleagues across the entire Federal Reserve System, so try to identify these subject matter experts that provide us with the depth of expertise in the areas that we're focused on to ensure that we're doing the smartest work possible. But also, we work extensively with other colleagues outside of the Federal Reserve System. Primarily, we have a strategic partnership with the Bank for International Settlements, Innovation Hub. We work with the private sector, with technology vendors, consulting firms, banks and non-bank financial institutions. And that also provides us with the breadth of capabilities that we need to actually do the work that we're conducting. So this model of collaboration is really a critical component of how we do our work. And the practical work that we're doing, you referenced two of our current projects, Agora and the Regulated Settlement Network. Those are two that are currently underway. And there's a body of research that's really led us to this point with Agora and RSN. We started with a project called Project Cedar a couple of years ago. And there's a progression through all of our projects that's led us to the point where we are now. Project Cedar focused on understanding, can tokenization deliver certain benefits relative to foreign exchange capabilities? And there was a phase 2 Project Cedar that we conducted in collaboration with the Monetary Authority of Singapore, which focused more on interoperability, another critical aspect to test tokenization is really going to work at scale. We then worked on a project called the Regulated Liability Network, or RLN, which added additional assets to different use cases that we were focused on, and also added complexity around cross-border and payments-oriented use cases that we believe are high-value use cases to focus on. And it's really that progression that's now led us to Agora and the Regulated Settlement Network projects. RSN has expanded the focus on different sorts of digital assets that might benefit from tokenization. It's also added complexity relative to the interoperability problem that exists that we're trying to understand how we might solve for that. And Agora is an example of a project that's global in its scope. We're working with 6 other central banks, and 41 private sector organizations in that project. It really provides us with an incredible opportunity to learn from many of the users and customers of these new types of products and services. So there's been this clear path through all of our research that's led to this point of complexity with the projects that we're testing today. And one thing that I would emphasize is that all of our work is focused just on research and experimentation. So we're not building production systems with the work that we're doing, but we're conducting research that ideally might inform what production systems, if they come to market, might contain. So we're very excited about the work that we're involved with currently. Some of the key areas that I referenced earlier that we believe are critical to understand relative to compression and tokenization include interoperability, so understanding how these different systems will communicate with each other. If we can't figure that out, this isn't going to work. That's also based on a hypothesis that we have that the future will really be heterogeneous. There won't be one ledger to rule them all. There won't be a single system that will provide products and services within a tokenized domain financial system. But there'll be different ledgers, there'll be different infrastructures that are available to different consumers, different industry actors, different banks that are specific to the use cases that they're focused on, to their risk profile, to the jurisdiction that they represent, those sorts of things. So if the world is going to be heterogeneous, interoperability is one of the things that needs to be solved for to figure that out. And as we think really towards the future and what the future might look like and the role of the Organization Center and central banks for the future, there are a few things that we have in mind. One is that traditionally central banks have played an important role relative to innovation in financial markets. And they've done that together with collaboration with industry. So it'll be interesting to see how that evolves in the future within the tokenized domain. That collaboration, again, is a critical component of our working model. And I think will be an important success factor if tokenization really is going to evolve and develop at scale. So I'll stop there.
Thank you, Kara. It's fascinating. We have just a couple of minutes left, and I really want to end on really high note. We've heard all about the great work that the banks and the private sector exchanges are doing, but I want to take a minute to highlight what Stellar Foundation is doing. They have been assisting with the movement of humanitarian aid for the UNHCR and in connection with MoneyGram as well. One statistic, Denelle, that you shared was that you sent over $4 million in aid to Ukraine and various refugee camps, and it saved $12 million in operational efficiencies. Tell us about the great work of Stellar Foundation and how these rails make movement of aid, incredibly possible to reach sort of the underbanked and those that just don't have access.
Yeah, thank you. It's so great to be here. These are my opinions and the opinions of the Stellar Development Foundation. So we are really focused on tokenization, and tokenization has been such an important piece. What we're in the UNHCR case, that's tokenization of fiat. So USDC is the asset that's leveraged. There's tons of interoperability here because it's interoperability with traditional financial infrastructure like MoneyGram, so that the recipient can receive a text message from the UN saying you are eligible to receive aid, and then they to download the wallet, the aid is in the wallet. So the aid gets to them in less than 3 minutes of the whole process. And then they can choose, do I want to put it in my bank account, do I want to cash out at the local MoneyGram, what do I want to do with it? And that gives them not just the opportunity to receive this aid, but a lot of autonomy and independence to what they do with it. There's security, there's a lot of different pieces that come along with it. So it's just a great example of tokenization working cross-border and making it so that lots of folks can actually participate in this. And the UNHCR has expanded their efforts outside of Ukraine, and it's just been wonderful to work with them. They did this project, we started in February, right after the war in Ukraine began, and they launched by December of that year. So that was remarkable in terms of speed. But I also want to talk about tokenization that's happening with the blessing of the regulators domestically, and that's the Franklin Templeton has issued a money market fund on Stellar. And it's the largest money market fund, and the SEC has been working with them since 2019 to make this happen. So we do see a lot of there's also bonds that are on Stellar issued by WisdomTree. So tokenization is it's alive, it's working in the United States. We see lots of interest in it. So I kind of love what we've done working with the regulatory bodies to make this come together. I want to see more. I want to see more clarity. We want to see more ease of use here. But it's pretty remarkable, and I see that it's the present, but it's the future. We see this as becoming something that we're gonna see tokenized bank deposits. There's gonna be a lot of really cool things to be able to make things like aid and just traditional financial infrastructure work more smoothly from an interoperability standpoint as well. You can't do one without the other. We need it all to work together. And I'm 1000% in agreement that you don't have one distributed ledger technology when, although everybody should check out Stellar, which is pretty great, but they all should work together.